Hello folks, crazy times out there, which brings more time to create some videos. So if you follow me on social media at all, you'll see that I went to the Intensive 11 this past weekend, which is it's hard to say what you can call it. When I've told people, I don't really like calling it continuing education, even though that's kind of what it is, and I don't really like calling it a seminar because it's not really a seminar. It's not really a class either. To describe the experience, so most continuing education events you go to, or seminars or classes, it's you sitting in a class with probably a decent amount of people, quite a few, and there's somebody presenting information. The problem with these things, there's usually some good information, but the problem with these things is there's no real dialogue or conversation through the entire thing. It's someone spoon feeding you a bunch of information and you're like, oh cool, and you're writing it down in your notebook, and then you might get to ask one or two questions at the end, and then boom, the day's over, and then you go back to your workplace and try to implement these ideas or see where you might fit them into what you're already doing. That's not what this was. This was basically almost a four-day experience, I would call it. And it's not like there was 9. So Bill Hartman put this on, him, and then besides him, there's 9 other brains in the room. And which is not a lot of people, but it's the perfect amount of people to get what you want to get out of it. Because during this, there's no, here's all the information, go. It's, let's talk about these principles, these concepts, and we're all going to learn from each other. We all have our own prior experience and biases it's going to make me ask a much different question than somebody else, even though we might have the same sort of concerns with what's being kind of presented and laid out. But it's an immersive experience where when I posted about it on social media, I didn't even want to say that I learned from it because it just didn't really do it justice. What I got from it was I unlearned a lot, and what I did learn was to start. Everything I did know isn't false or wrong at all. I think I might have just reached conclusions with a different. I didn't really know how I reached conclusions for some things, and I was coming at it from a completely different angle. So this experience was, I don't want to. If you know anything about it, I 100% believe you should apply and keep applying until you get in because it's a fantastic experience. But I don't want to give it all away. But the key thing about this is you're learning to think from first principles. Basically, you're trying to, from a human movement standpoint, or a human performance standpoint, you're trying to go all the way back to things like, how does physics work? What are some fundamental principles of the universe that, if we know, might help us intervene with our clients, or might lead us to better outcomes from a human movement, human performance standpoint. And that's one thing we're just not taught in school. College especially. My college education is basically crap, and I could just throw it out the window right now. And I guess it did have a certain utility, but most of what I have learned has come 100% out of college. But what do they do when you're in school? You have an hour and a half long class, or you have a 3-hour lab, and here's all this information, and you don't really get you ask questions not about the validity of it, or like how did they get to this point. You ask questions in a sort of way that's going to help you get the right answer. You're always focused on right answers that is going to help you get a good grade on the test so you can graduate and you can get a big boy and girl job. What it doesn't give you is asking, where did this come from? Like, from an anatomy perspective, here are the bones, here are the muscles, these muscles attached to this part of the bone, this muscle's here. Okay, get that picture in your head, try to memorize what these muscles pull on, try to memorize where these muscles and bones are located, and if you do that really well, you'll get an A on the test. What it doesn't give you is that all? Like, is that all human movement really is? Is it just muscles and bones? Because that doesn't seem likely if most of our body is made of fluid and water, and the way humans interact or the way humans move when they're living is completely different than if you lay a dead person on the table and you dissect them, look at the muscles, look at the insertions, look at the bones, and have that framework to work with when you're thinking about movement. That is, I think that is very reductionist. I think it doesn't give you a good model or picture to work with in your head that's going to really help you understand humans moving when they're living, and I don't think it's going to help lead to the best outcomes possible when you're working with athletes. So the intensive was all about kind of not necessarily forgetting that, but maybe there's something better out there, a better model out there that we could be working with that gives a better representation of how humans move. And the starting point of that is we're 99% water and 1% stuff, and then that 1% stuff is mostly fluid as well. So an easy way to think about it is if you've been to a car lot and you see those inflatable tube man bouncing all over the place, that thing, whatever you want to call it, the tube man is moving through air. So basically it's compressing one side and then the air floats to the other side, which gives the tube man, boom, my arm extends while this kind of shrinks and compresses, this expands. But it's moving through air, through pressurized air. So humans aren't too off from that. We're a lot more full of water and we have muscles. So we're full of water and fluid, that makes most of us, but we also have muscles that can compress and expand. So that is essentially how we move through space, muscles compress, that shifts air, pressure and fluid to another area of the body, and that expands. So, how do I want to give a good, how do I want to talk about this specifically when it comes to, the strategy, you basically have two strategies. Knowing this, you basically have two strategies to move. You can inhale and you can exhale. An inhale is more of an expansion strategy. So when I inhale deep, that's going to expand, that's going to shift pressures and fluids in a way where it causes certain areas to expand. And when I exhale, that's going to compress certain areas, but also help me move. So if you think an easy way to think about this is in terms of a power lifter. What is a power lifter strategy if you put a bar on a power lifter's back and tell them to squat, what is the strategy they're going to use to move? It's going to be to exhale. Now this might initially seem a little counterintuitive because when you think of a power lifter squatting and lifting heavy weight, they don't breathe at all the entire time. True, but what are they trying to do? So they take a deep breath in, and then when they come up, they're trying to exhale, but they're closing themselves off here because they want to maintain that pressure down and squeeze and compress hard to lift the weight up. So, which is why a power lifter, you might hear where they let a little bit of air out, but they're trying to exhale super hard to create more internal pressure to help them lift the weight. So imagine a power lifter, they get to the bottom, as soon as they start to come up, they exhale, but they actually let all that air out. They're likely not going to be as strong as if they try to exhale, but don't let the air out. Or think about it this way, get a bunch of weight on your back, don't do anything, but as soon as you start to squat down, start to inhale as you're squatting the weight down, and then exhale to come up. That is, or do this, try to inhale on the way down, exhale at the bottom, and then try to inhale on the way back up. Total terrible strategy if you're trying to lift a lot of weight. So going back, those are our two big strategies to move. And again, if you think about this in terms of fluid and muscles, all the muscles are doing are compressing and shifting the water, the fluid, and the air somewhere else, causing that area to expand. So this is in the guts hold a lot of the fluid, and the way the guts are oriented changes. They're not oriented in a super symmetrical manner, which causes more problems. I don't want to say problems because they're not inherently a problem, but that just throws more dynamic stuff into the system that we have to account for as well. I won't necessarily get into that here. Maybe that's a time for a later video. But again, so this is the framework we should be working with. Knowing what we know about physics and about what we're actually made of, that seems more likely that is going to affect how we move compared to muscles and bones. So humans act or move more as a pressurized system than a lever and pulley system where muscles are just pulling on bones and the bones are moving. And if you think about it, but your bones don't ever touch. Like there's fluid separating your bones all the time. And so you're basically full of a bunch of water-like structural tubes. And they're arranged in a non-symmetrical way, more of a helical way. And this, again, I don't want to give away everything that we talked about, even though I'm not going to be able to do it justice anyways, but this is the framework we have to work with when it comes to movement, and these things are affecting movement in certain ways, which might give us an idea of why certain protocols or certain strategies we've used in the past to try to increase motion or recapture motion in certain areas, they might have worked, but they might have worked for the wrong reason, or they have just not been nearly the best strategy we should be able to use to recapture movement. So knowing this framework and knowing this background, that should give us better ideas on how to help and intervene with our clients and athletes, and give us just better strategies to help our people out. So yeah, that's the biggest, probably the biggest takeaway, because if you use that as your starting point, it might be might hit you in the gut and be like, man, what do I do with all the information I've been using there for? And I don't think you have to completely scrap everything, because then you're operating from a framework of a lot of uncertainty, and you might have, what's the one phrase called? Paralysis by analysis. So you still have to kind of stick to your guns, but I think you should, knowing this, having this model and framework to work with, you just kind of have to keep building off of it, keep learning and keep applying, but it should give you a better representation on how we can intervene and help people. So I mentioned in a previous video, which I might actually just merge into the same video, I'm talking about guts, or your organs here in your abdomen, and how they influence movement. So what I'm about to say might sound really crazy, and it definitely is, but it also makes quite a bit of sense at the same time. So the way our guts are oriented in our abdomen are actually at an angle. So if I stand up, if you were to look at my guts from the inside, they're actually angled from here to there, so they're angled down. And then my guts are asymmetrical. Some are heavier and less heavy than others. And my guts, the fluid in my guts and in my organs spin. So, what? They spin because what's the one force that is always acting upon us? That's gravity. So if gravity is applying force straight down, and I have basically giant balloons of fluid in my gut, what is that fluid? If the fluid's just sitting there, the gravity is going to cause that fluid to start to spin down. And if we know about gyroscopes and we know about angular momentum, if my guts are kind of asymmetrical and they're kind of laying this way as opposed to here, I got fluid flowing this way, then I have gravity acting straight down, and then because the torque of the turn or the angular momentum is going to chase that, so my guts are going to start spinning like this. So basically what I have is a gyroscope in my guts from the way that they're oriented, gravity applying force straight down, and that's going to makes them start to spin like this. So basically this is happening all the time. So what that does is imagine there's a bunch of fluid spinning in your guts. What's that going to do? It's going to make you want to turn, boom, this way, fall to your left, and fall back onto your left side due to the spin of the fluid in our guts. So obviously what we have to do to counterbalance that, or counteract that, is we have to I want to shove my rib cage forward on this side and push from my shoulder blade on the back side, push this way to keep my guts from spinning and throwing me flat that way. So I do this, and that causes my guts to kind of spin back in, but there's still this kind of spinning motion. It's I'm holding that inside by pushing my shoulder blade forward and my rib cage forward on that side. And so that gives you asymmetry again already, and your body's going to kind of adapt to that all the time, which might think about like running on a track. You always run to the left, and think about trying to run right. It'd be a lot harder. I guess just go out and apply it and see what happens. But just think about that, how turning to this way is kind of a lot easier. But yeah, so that's knowing this dynamic happening internally in your guts gives you an appreciation on kind of how that affects everything, and again gives you an appreciation of how fluid dynamics internally affect human movement.